What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan, and today we've got a lot to talk about because the Washington Commanders, not only did they have another practice open to fans today, we're going to break that down in the second half of the episode, but first, we have to talk about the depth chart that got released today for the Washington Commanders because Commanders, they've got a game on Saturday. They have to release an unofficial depth chart, even though it is released by the teams. I don't really know why they call it unofficial, but we got to go through that. And probably the biggest news of the day was Jayden Daniels, Dan Quinn naming Jayden Daniels the starter, the QB1 for Saturday's game against the New York Jets. We'll just get right into that. So Jayden Daniels will start Saturday's game against the Jets. This has been kind of what's been expected to be announced at some point. It's more of a when was Jayden Daniels going to be announced starter compared to if Jayden Daniels is going to be announced starter. Unlike you look at a guy like Drake May, where that conversation is kind of if. For Jayden Daniels and where kind of this quarterback room is at, it was more of a when because he is clearly the best quarterback on the roster. He has shown that throughout the entire offseason. He showed it in OTAs, minicamp, and then he showed it again throughout training camp because, I mean, it's been clear. I know the reporters, a lot of the beat reporters have been saying it, but people don't really like go out to the practices and watch. So you kind of just trust what the reporters say. But I mean, so I was a little bit skeptical at first, but then when I went to go see him Friday, Sunday, today, you could tell he is the best quarterback on the roster. And there's a clear difference between him and Mariota and Driscoll and Hartman. So Jayden Daniels is QB1. Now, Quinn didn't announce him as the QB1 for week 1 of the regular season. I don't expect that to happen until maybe after the second preseason game. But Jayden Daniels will start Saturday's game against the New York Jets. Now, how long will he play? Dan Quinn, through some other comments that he had in his pre-practice press conference, it sounds like he's only going to play a drive or two. It's going to be mostly Jeff Driscoll and Sam Hartman kind of battling out for that QB3 spot throughout the game. I wouldn't expect to see a ton of Jayden Daniels. I think Daniels will probably play the most, maybe like a little bit more than a quarter, maybe a half in the week 2 preseason game against the Dolphins, I think. So I've mentioned it in the past episodes. The thing with Daniels, he's not going to get a lot of playing time during the preseason, and rightfully so. Again, you don't want your franchise quarterback to get injured. The key with him is how he performs during these joint practices against the other teams, like the Jets, where he sees a different defense for the first time ever, really, in the NFL. Like he just saw the Commanders' defense so far, and again, like it's like when you play pickup basketball with someone, with like your best friend over and over again, you kind of get used to their moves, their techniques, their kind of the way they do things, and like their tendencies. And so that's kind of been the big question mark with Jayden Daniels is his success recently. Is it more because he has seen this defense over the last month or so every day for the last month? Or is it because he's actually growing as a reading through his progressions and all that, which Dan Quinn has said it's that second option. He is very impressed with Jayden Daniels and his development. He is ahead of schedule. I don't think he used the words ahead of schedule, but he was very impressed with how mature he is and pretty much the way he does things throughout the offseason so far. I think he did say like he was surprised by how much he already knows and all that stuff. So I think it's going to be that second option. But again, the time will tell. Thursday's practice, we'll get into that at the end of the episode against the Jets, and the one next week against the Miami Dolphins as well. But ultimately, Jayden Daniels is now your QB1, at least for this week, heading into the game against the New York Jets. Again, I expect this to be I don't expect him to not start week 1. I don't expect him to not start even like the preseason week 2 game against the Dolphins. I expect him to start that game. So not that much of a surprise, but it's more of a when than an if. And it happens with the depth chart being released. Now, that wasn't the only storyline here with the depth chart being released today, the first unofficial one for the Washington Commanders. I'm going to kind of break it down. I have it up on my screen right now. We'll start with the offense, and then we'll get into the defense and the special teams at the end. But I do want to say the the coaching staff is what was being a little sneaky with their with how they did these how they basically like lined up the depth chart, because both the offense and the defense have 12 starters. They have 12 starters listed. Again, you can only play 11 players at a time. So they don't really want to give away their what they're trying to do in terms of formations and scheme and all of that. So they listed out 12 starters on both offense and defense. So keep that in mind. All right. We'll start on the offense. At quarterback, QB1 is Jayden Daniels. And then you have Marcus Mariota behind him, Jeff Driscoll, and Sam Hartman. No surprises there. This has been like what's happening in practice. So no surprises there. To running back now, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler are the two starters. They list two starting running backs. Again, you can kind of just Robinson is listed like above Austin Eckler. So does that make him wide receiver sorry, not wide receiver, running back one? I don't really know, but Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, the starters. Your second string are Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols, and then your third string, the two UDFA's, Michael Wiley and Austin Jones. Once more, not really any surprises. If I had to look at it and how it's kind of formatted, I would say Brian Robinson is the RB1, Eckler's the RB2, Chris Rodriguez is the RB3, and McNichols is the RB4. Uh, I think that makes the most sense. So again, no really any big surprises at running back either. We're gonna go to tight end because this one also doesn't really have that any surprises. Zach Ertz as tight end 1, John Bates as tight end 2, Ben Sinnott and Armani Rogers listed as the third string as tight end 3. They're kind of tied. And then Cole Turner and Colson Yankoff are both listed as the fourth string tight end. So no surprises here. Maybe Armani Rogers over Cole Turner and Yankoff. You could maybe say, oh, that's a little bit of a surprise. I didn't really see that as much of a surprise. I kind of expected Rogers to be the tight end 4. I mean, they list him in the same box as Ben Sinnott. So that's a little bit interesting. But again, nothing really too surprising. Now for wide receiver. We have Terry McLaurin as wide receiver 1. We have Olamide Zaccheaus and Jahan Dotson also listed as starters. Now, Zaccheaus is listed above Jahan Dotson. I don't know if that means he's wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I don't really want to get into that much. But Zaccheaus and Dotson, or Dotson Zaccheaus, again, I don't think it really matters that much. It's just all three of those guys are going to be the starters. Then at the second string, we have De'Ami Brown as wide receiver 4, Luke McCaffrey as wide receiver 5, Jamison Crowder as wide receiver 6. And then third string, Bryson Tremaine, as my garage opens, Bryson Tremaine as wide receiver 7. We have Kaz Allen as wide receiver 8, and Mitchell Tinsley as wide receiver 9. And then in the fourth string, Davion Davis as wide receiver 10, Byron Pringle as wide receiver 11, and Marcus Rosemary-Jack Saint as wide receiver 12. So again, that back half can kind of get mixed up a little bit. But just third string, there's kind of split them into third string, fourth string. Between that, I think it's kind of still mixed up. So basically, third string, I feel like the contenders right now for wide receiver 6, just based off of this initial depth chart, are Jamison Crowder, Bryson Tremaine, Kaz Allen, Mitchell Tinsley. I think are the guys that are competing for wide receiver 6 right now. I'd call McLaurin, Zaccheaus, Dotson, McCaffrey, and Brown all locks right now to make the roster. Yes, even De'Ami Brown. But Crowder is right now listed as wide receiver 6. And then you have Tremaine as wide receiver 7, Allen and Tinsley. If I had to take a guess right now who that wide receiver 6 might be, ultimately, like I would say, I guess Jamison Crowder, but I really think it could be a toss up between Crowder and Tremaine, because Tremaine has had a great training camp so far. Now to the offensive line. Brandon Coleman, the third round pick out of TCU, is listed as your starting left tackle. Nick Allegretti is left guard. Tyler Biotish is at center. Right guard is Sam Cosmi, and right tackle is Andrew Wiley. If you looked at my Twitter, this is exactly how I had it lined up. I don't think this isn't really that surprising to me. Those are the 5 guys, even though you might like, oh, Wiley's bad, whatever. I mean, these are the 5 guys that, and like Wiley's is so much better than a guy like a Trent Scott or a Brain Daniels right now. The bar is not high for Wiley to beat. So Andrew Wiley's at right tackle. The second string, Cornelius Lucas is listed at left tackle. Left guard is Chris Paul. Center is Michael Dieter. Right guard is Julian Good-Jones, who I feel like the not training staff, the coaching staff really likes Julian Good-Jones. He's getting a lot of second team reps. Trent Scott is at right tackle, and then the third stringers, Alex Akinbulu at left tackle, Mason Brooks at left guard, Ricky Stromberg at center. Right guard is also listed as Ricky Stromberg. Right tackle is Jayden Daniels, and then fourth string is David Noah Guwu Nuau David New. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but it's David's the fourth string right tackle. So, um, so again, not really that much any surprises. I in the offensive line, maybe Brandon Coleman being your starting left tackle, I think is kind of the big storyline here. But just based off his performance so far in camp, he earned it. So he beats out Cornelius Lucas. I right now I'll get into it with the practices, but this offensive line unit is very banged up, especially the starters. I'll be curious to see what starters will actually play on Saturday because I don't think it'll be that many in terms of the offensive line. So I expect to see a lot of Chris Paul, Trent Scott, Cornelius Lucas, and then Julian Good-Jones as well in case Sam Cosmi can't go because I'll get into that in a little bit, but he wasn't at practice today. Ricky Stromberg was a little bit interesting, having him as a third string guy. He's coming off he destroyed his knee last year in his rookie season, but he's coming off that major injury. I don't really know if this coaching staff really likes him or not. The former third round pick last year, 2023 third round pick out of Arkansas, was a lot of people's favorite draft crushes, and he hasn't really turned out so far. Hasn't really gotten an opportunity, you could say, to get some first team reps. So that's the offensive line. That's the offense overall. Again, not really that many surprises in terms of the offensive line or the offense in general. Probably the big storylines are being Jayden Daniels, QB1, Brendan Coleman, left tackle one. That's pretty much it. Like there wasn't really that many big time surprises. I think some people thought Luke McCaffrey might be wide receiver 3, so you could say he was a little bit low. But again, this is just the depth chart for this upcoming game against the Jets on Saturday. So moving on to the defense now. All right, the defense, again, they listed 12 starters. So they listed 12 starters. They don't really want people to know what type of formations they're trying to run. At defensive end, we have Cleveland Farrell and Dorrance Armstrong as your two starting defensive ends. That's expected. They've been the two starting defensive ends all camp long. Beyond that, you have KJ Henry, second string, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, the 7th round pick this year, also with the second stringers. Third string, Jalen Harris and Andre Jones. Jones was the 7th round pick last year in 2023. And then fourth string, F.A. Obata. Again, F.A. Obata is currently on the physically unable to perform list. We'll have to wait and see, but I expect him to pretty much be with that second string unit, whether it is at defensive end or defensive tackle. He can play up and down the defensive line. So hopefully he is healthy for the beginning of the season, but I'm not getting my hopes up there. At the interior defensive line now, we have Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne as your starters. No surprise there. And then we have Johnny Newton and John Ridgeway as your second stringers. Fedarian Mathis and Fedarian Mathis is your third stringer. And then Norrell Pollard, Taylor Stallworth, and Benning Potoai are your fourth stringers. Yeah, okay, I think I got that right. So there's that. I think there's like some they kind of like repeated some names with the defensive tackle unit on the website, so it's a little bit messed up in terms of the third and fourth stringers because they had Mathis twice for some reason, but like with a different first name on one of them. So it's a little bit mixed up on the website in terms of third and fourth stringers. But the big one here, John Ridgeway over Fedarian Mathis. Ridgeway's with the second stringers, Fedarian Mathis with the third stringers. Again, to me, not that much of a surprise. I just expected, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, John Ridgeway, especially since he was on the Dallas Cowboys in Dan Quinn's defense. He was a former 5th round pick for the Cowboys just, I believe, 2 years ago, or maybe what was last year. So I expected John Ridgeway, the coaches to like John Ridgeway more than they do for Fedarian Mathis. Plus, they kind of play a similar position, in terms and similar style. So again, do they really need Fedarian Mathis on this team in terms of the final lineup? Not really sure they do. So Fedarian Mathis as a vet cut could be something to keep an eye on. Now at linebacker, they have two outside linebackers and a middle linebacker. We'll start with middle linebacker. We have Bobby Wagner, Jordan McGee, and then Bo Bauer. This is again expected. Wagner's the starter this year. He's going to be that center of the defense. Then Jordan McGee, the 5th-round pick, and then Bo Bauer, who has really shown that he has command of that defense. I will say it is very impressive because he's making calls out there. I believe he's a UDFA linebacker. So he's been very impressive in terms of his command of the defense at middle linebacker. Not sure if he's going to make the team, but he's been very impressive so far. And then outside linebacker, Frankie Louvu and Dante Fowler at outside linebacker. I was kind of curious if Fowler was going to be listed at defensive end or outside linebacker. They go ahead and list him at outside linebacker. Then Jamin Davis and Anthony Pittman with the second stringers, and Keandre Jones and Michael Walker as the third stringers. Jamin Davis listed at outside linebacker, even though he's been getting the majority of his snaps and reps at defensive end. That's something to take note of. So Jamin Davis listed with the second stringers currently. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, though. So again, not really that many surprises at outside linebacker. I'd have to say Wagner, Louvu, McGee, and Pittman are probably most likely to be the 4 guys at linebacker. I don't really know if they keep more than that just because of how stacked and how deep their secondary is right now in terms of young guys with a lot of potential. So heading into the secondary, we'll start at cornerback. Mike Sainristil, Noah Ibenagany, and Caillou Blue Kelly are the guys listed at star, in my opinion, or kind of like slot guys. I kind of separate them from the rest of the other ones, even though they're listed at cornerback. That position kind of is more of a slot corner star position, as Dan Quinn calls it. So I'll kind of separate that into one. And then as for your actual cornerbacks, Benjamin St-Juste and Michael Davis are named your starters at corner position, which means Emmanuel Forbes is listed as a second stringer or a reserve player, which is kind of surprising. I thought Forbes was going to be listed as a starter alongside Benjamin St-Juste, but Michael Davis has had a good camp so far. I didn't know if it had he had enough of a good camp to jump Forbes in the depth chart, but heading into the first preseason game of the year, he's done exactly that. So Michael Davis is your starting cornerback alongside Benjamin St-Juste. Forbes is your second stringer along with Tariq Castro Fields. I feel like Castro Fields could be a guy to maybe steal a roster spot if he isn't already locked into one. He's had a pretty solid camp. And then Chigo Newsium and James Pierre are your third string corners, and then Nick Whiteside is your fourth string corner. So the corner position, again, the big surprise probably in this entire defensive depth chart was Michael Davis over Emmanuel Forbes. I mean, that'll be interesting to see. Davis isn't really known for his outside corner ability, so we'll have to wait and see what's going to go on there. But moving on to the safety position, I mentioned this. I predicted that Derek Forrest was not going to be a starter, and he is not a starter. Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin. Jeremy Chin is your starting strong safety. Quan Martin is your starting free safety. I mean, Forrest is kind of falling down the depth chart a little bit. Maybe not as much as some reporters are making it out to be, maybe exaggerating a little bit more, because Derek Forrest is listed as your third safety, your backup for Jeremy Chin at strong safety. Jeremy Reeves is the backup at free safety. Dom Hampton is a third string at strong safety with Percy Butler, third string at free safety. And then Ben Nickel and Tyler Owens round out the group with being a strong safety and then free safety, respectively. So Chin and Martin are your starters. I'm very excited for Quan Martin this year. The 2023 draft class was very bad from Ron Rivera, but there's been one bright spot so far, and that has been Quan Martin. I'm excited to see what Quan Martin can bring, and if he can take a sophomore leap this year, because we saw some flashes down the stretch of last season. Derek Forrest, I mentioned it before, he could potentially be a veteran cut, just because there's other guys that are currently behind him in the depth chart that Dan Quinn and company have a connection to, like Dom Hampton, their 5th-round pick from this year, is currently behind him. Could potentially jump him in the depth chart. Percy Butler, they've liked a lot. Percy Butler's got some first-team reps, so that'll be interesting. And then Tyler Owens has been kind of up and down so far throughout camp and is more of a super athletic defensive back. Owens could probably be on the practice squad. I don't know if he'd actually get picked up off of that. So that's the defense. Again, Probably the biggest surprise of the entire depth chart was Michael Davis over Emmanuel Forbes. That was probably the biggest one, but again, not really that many surprises in terms of starters. We kind of already knew who those guys were going to be. Some backups, I would say, like some more depth stuff, like John Ridgeway over Fidarian Mathis, Jamin Davis being a second stringer, Javante Jean-Baptiste being a second stringer on the defensive end side, and him being over Andre Jones is maybe a little bit surprising, and then Derek Forrest being a backup. But beyond that, like not that much surprises. As far as special teams are concerned, Tress Way is your punter. Ramiz Ahmed is listed ahead of Riley Patterson right now at kicker. Interesting to note that. Tress Way is your holder. Long snappers Tyler Ott. Your kick returner is listed as Noah Igbenogany as your kick returner. Noah Igbenogany. I have not seen Noah Igbenogany take any punt return or kick return um, returns so far, or reps throughout training camp so far. So that was a little bit of a surprise. Kaz Allen is the backup kick returner. And as far as punt returner, Jamison Crowder is your starter. Jahan Dotson is your backup. So that is it for the depth chart. Again, this depth chart is just for this one game. So again, looking into next week and stuff, some of these moves or some of these guys like Michael Davis being over Emmanuel Forbes and stuff like that, maybe they just want to see more of Michael Davis during this game or more of Emmanuel Forbes. So they're listing him as a backup and they just don't want to leave one starter out there. So that was that. Moving on now to today's practice, Tuesday's practice. Let me pull up the um, my notes from practice today. Yeah, so today's practice was pretty light. It was 1 hour, 30 minutes, somewhere around there. Started with a walkthrough, then we had one-on-ones, we had punt stuff, 11 on 11, more punt stuff, individual position stuff, more 11 on 11, and then we finished things off with the kicking competition. So, yeah, the actual stuff that they did, nothing really was that surprising, or nothing crazy or stuff. It was more of who wasn't there today, which was probably the main storylines. 3 of the 5 starters on the offensive line were not practicing for the Washington Commanders today, and we are at a point where we should definitely take note of this. 3 of the 5 starters are not practicing. Andrew Wiley is still out with tightness. Tightness on what? I do not know. But he's currently out with tightness still. If it was, I guess, like he saw the weather today, it was 98 degrees with humidity or something like that. He's like, Coach, I'm tight. I'm out. I'm out. He's not doing it. So Andrew Wiley out with tightness. Brandon Coleman was not practicing today. The starting left tackle, your new starting left tackle now, Brandon Coleman, was not practicing today. And then Sam Cosmi was also, I just did not see Sam Cosmi at practice. I saw Coleman. I saw Andrew Wiley. They were both there. Well, actually, I don't know. Coleman might have not been there, but Andrew Wiley was for sure there. He was just on the sideline. I did not see Sam Cosmi at all. I don't know exactly what is up with Sam Cosmi, but yeah, hopefully he's good because I mean, at this point, I don't care. I don't really need him to play in the preseason game this week. I don't think he will just because he's out. It's Tuesday of a game week and he's not practicing for the preseason. So I don't expect him to play on Saturday. I don't expect Wiley to play on Saturday because Wiley's been out for at least a week now, maybe a little bit more than that. Hopefully Brendan Coleman plays. I want to see him. But yeah, so it was a very thin offensive line. You had Chris Paul in the starting lineup. You had Julian Good-Jones getting starting lineup reps. You had Trent Scott on the outside along with Jayden Daniels as well. So it was a very thin offensive line, and it really showed in practice because the defensive line was eating up the offensive line. Jayden Daniels did not have that much time in the pocket. Very first play of the first 11 on 11 drills was a would-be sack. Like Daniels got to the back of his drop, and he was already sacked. He was already sacked. Like he got to the back of the drop, and he would have been on the ground. There was no way about it. There was 3 guys, 3 edge rushers in his face. It wasn't great from the offensive line. It got better a little bit through practice, but it was a lot of short stuff from Jayden Daniels today. He didn't really he took 1 deep shot, and it was a completion to who was it? To Bryson Tremaine down the field. It was a great ball. Tremaine made a great catch. Tremaine was slow to get up though. We'll have to wait and see if there's a injury or maybe an injury that could put him out for some days there. But I think he was okay. I think he came back in. Yeah, he came back in later on. So yeah, he's good. But he was a little bit slow to get up. He got the wind knocked out of him. It was a great catch by Tremaine. He's making play after play, and that's why I said he's definitely going to be competing for that wide receiver 6 spot because there's no other wide receiver on the roster that brings a 6'4" build like he does, that like he has. So that's something to keep an eye on. Um, Daniels made another good pass to Zach Ertz. It was kind of like a post on the right side. It was probably 20, 25 yards downfield. It was probably 20 yards downfield. Ertz made a great one-handed grab, reaching out and gets his feet in on the sideline as well. That will probably be posted by the Commanders' social media account at some point. Probably that one or the Tremaine one are going to be posted at some point today. Beyond that, it was a lot of kind of shorter stuff because the offensive line just didn't really give him that much time. Daniel's final stat line, I think I had it somewhere, but he was 7 of 10, and I kind of gave him some like slack too for that because um like the sack on the first play, and then he may or may not have been sacked on some of the other plays because he was just under so much pressure, and he wasn't really running out of it full speed. He wasn't really going full speed, so it's kind of hard to tell if he would have been sacked or not, like in an actual in-game scenario. But it was a lot of just shorter stuff. He had the sack to begin with, and then complete short right to Zacchaeus, incomplete on a screen to Eckler. I will say he was 7 of 10. His 3 incompletions were not great. One of them was the halfback screen to Eckler. He just missed Eckler on the screen. Like, there's just no way around it. I don't really know if he could see him or not through the pressure that he was getting, but he just completely missed him. Followed it up with an incompletion left sideline to De'Ami Brown. It looked like there was a little bit of a miscommunication there. Brown was kind of running up the sideline, and then Daniels kind of just threw it out of bounds. So I don't really know. And he wasn't like throwing it up in Brown's direction out of bounds. He just threw it straight out of bounds. So I think there was some miscommunication there. Complete to Zach Ertz. That was the one-handed grab. And then he followed it up with the very next play being the deep shot to Bryson Tremaine. Incomplete, deep middle to Jahan. Wait, no. I think Jahan. Oh no, yeah, incomplete deep middle to Jahan. It was broken up, and then oh no, he missed him. He overshot him. That was the one he overshot him. Jahan made another good play though. It was a deep shot from Marcus Mariota where Jahan kind of um came back to the ball and made a catch while falling to the ground. It was very very good from Jahan Dotson. But and then after that, it was kind of just a lot of short stuff. Complete short left to Bryson Tremaine, complete short left to Brian Robinson, complete short right screen to Olamide Zacchaeus, and a complete short middle to Zach Ertz. So it was a lot of the shorter stuff after that on the second and third. Sorry, on the second set of 11 on 11. So that was kind of the stuff on Daniels. Like I said, they're kind of just rotating everyone in on the offensive line, and I would say the same on the defense too. They're kind of mixing up the first and second team and adding in some third teamers into the first team reps as well. So they were kind of mixing it all up. You couldn't really tell if it was like the first team or the second team specifically today. But yeah, I will say someone who had a good day today was Michael Davis after being listed as the starter over Emmanuel Forbes. Davis had a couple pass breakups in the one-on-ones. It was kind of like red zone stuff. So he had a couple pass breakups there. And then I believe he had a pass breakup somewhere in the 11 on 11. So Michael Davis had a pretty good day today. What else? Mariota threw another interception. I believe it was to Ben Nickel who got the interception. I need to check here, but I believe it was Ben Nickel who had the interception there. It was kind of tipped. I didn't see who was tipped by. You can probably search it up on Twitter, and one of the beat reporters has it. I didn't see who it was tipped by, but it was tipped in the air, and then Ben Nickel with a diving interception. He was in the right place at the right time, and picks it up right before it hits the ground. It was definitely an interception, not an incompletion. So, good play from him. And I believe it was some like linebacker who tipped it into the air. So that is, yeah, that is Tuesday's practice. Again, it wasn't really that much. Oh, the kicking competition. I almost forgot about that. The kicking competition, both for the third open practice in a row, both kickers go 4 for 5. Uh, who was it? Ramiz Ahmed missed, I believe, from like 47. It was like in the higher 40s, maybe it was the low 50s. And then what's his name? Riley Patterson missed from 55. So I guess you could give the edge to Patterson there because he missed the farther one, but he made the closer ones. But so I don't know. But all of them had the strength. They just missed it wide. So yeah, there's that. The Terry McLaurin and some of the players were trying to get the crowd hyped up during these kicking drills or kicking competition to kind of emulate a crowd noise or stadium noise. It didn't really. I don't think the fans kind of understood what they were trying to do, but yeah. So that was something. What else? They had a dog. The dog mascot was there at practice today. I think some of the beat reporters posted something about that, and then I think that was it. I believe that was it. So that was the last practice that I'm going to be able to go to. I'm excited though for Thursday's practice because we're going to get right into that one. Thursday's practice will be with the New York Jets at the Jets facility. I'm excited for this because, like I said, this practice has been something that I've been keeping my eye on for over a week now because this kind of really shows where Jayden Daniels is at compared to other teams' defenses and not the same defense that he's been seeing for the last month. So it's kind of is going to be a big indicator on where Jayden Daniels is at in terms of his development heading into this preseason. I know it's early, but these joint practices, this is the majority. This is where the majority of Daniels reps are going to be coming from. It's not going to be coming in the preseason games. That's going to be more basic stuff just to get the kind of rhythm going and the kind of flow going of what a in-game stuff is going to look like. But these joint practices with the Jets and with the Dolphins next week are going to be huge because Jayden Daniels is going to get a ton of reps. It's only one practice. I don't expect to see a lot of Sam Hartman or Jeff Driscoll against this Jets defense. So, yeah, in terms of like the practice, I feel like Hartman and Driscoll are going to be playing a lot of the game on Saturday or the majority of it, just based off of what Dan Quinn has been saying. So, yeah. But yes, things I'm looking forward to is, of course, Jayden Daniels. How will the offensive line, if we actually have an offensive line, do against a very good pass rush from the New York Jets? I am kind of nervous to see Quinnen Williams against Nick Allegretti and whoever we have at right guard if Sam Cosmi can't go. So that will be something I'm going to keep an eye on. And then, of course, how will Emmanuel Forbes do against Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams and Aaron Rodgers in that offense? So Rodgers is not going to be playing. They announced he won't be playing on Saturday. So how will the first team offense? I don't know how much of the first team offense is playing for the Jets. I know Rodgers isn't playing, so I don't expect it to be much. I don't know if Garrett Wilson is playing and Mike Williams is playing. We'll have to wait and see. But how will that first team offense do against our first team defense, especially with a lot of new faces and a lot of new kind of the new scheme and everything that Joe Witt is bringing and Dan Quinn are bringing. So we'll have to wait and see for that as well. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's not I guess for today's episode because the next podcast is going to be out on Thursday. It'll be more in the afternoon though, probably around 3 or 4 is when that one's going to be coming out instead of one early like this one. It'll be coming out after the joint practice. I'm excited for that one. If you want to see me kind of give my thoughts on Commander stuff, you can follow me on Twitter or X at Mason_Kenahan. That'll do it for today's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys in the next one. Peace.